Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Ocean Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Ocean Dylan. It is crazy. In the summer, I talk about a lot of the same stuff on pretty much all my podcasts because we pretty much just have NFL training camp going on, NFL free agency. But I will also talk about the Olympic basketball team briefly. Not before talk about struggles in Philadelphia. So there was a report saying Philly hopes to bridge the divide between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. I've said this before. I think the more noise and drama surrounding a team in the offseason, the worse they tend to perform in the regular season. So reports of Hurts and Sirianni not getting along is doesn't really bode well for Philadelphia, especially after the disastrous finish to last year. I feel like Nick Sirianni just keeps falling down my list of coaches in the NFL. But yeah, Nick Sirianni without Shane Steichen has been very... The offense just looks not even close to the same. Like, this is a team that went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs 2 years ago in the Super Bowl, 38-35, complete shootout. The offense was not nearly as productive last year, and I don't think it's a lack of talent on the offense. They got Hurts. I think he's a tremendous talent. I think A.J. Brown is great. Devontae Smith is great. The Eagles have had the best O-line for a while, so it's not a lack of talent in the roster. It's the fact that Nick Sirianni needs a really good OC to rally the team, and it's just not working. All right, so the U.S. completely destroyed Brazil in their, I think it was the semifinal yesterday, I'm not sure. But, 35-point win, 122-87. Some pretty good performances from Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, and LeBron. But listen, I mean, we're at the point where I'm pretty confident the only thing that could possibly beat the U.S. is themselves. Because, on paper, there is no one even close, roster-wise, depth-wise. Serbia has Jokic. South Sudan has Wemby, and then Greece has Giannis. It's interesting because the top three players in the world right now are all not playing for the U.S. Jokic, Luka, and Giannis. But the thing is, that doesn't matter because U.S. just has the best depth by far in these Olympics, and it's giving them no peer. No rival at all. Giannis isn't going to do anything when he has to play against LeBron, KD, Steph, Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis. There's nothing stopping those guys. I mean, they benched Jason Tatum, who was probably the best player offensively in the finals. And then they benched Joel Embiid, who was also a 33-point per game scorer in the regular season. They're benching them and still blowing teams out of the water. I think it just shows the insane depth with them. And I really don't care about the Dream Team comparisons, to be honest with you. Because there is no comparing the two teams. They're very different. Eras wise, I can see parallels. I actually thought of another parallel yesterday. So the Dream Team, I pointed this out a few weeks ago. The Dream Team, they had a lot of players in their prime. Jordan, I think his best year was 92 or 93. Michael Jordan, he was very much in his prime that year. Pippen was arguably the best defender in the league at the time. They had a lot of players at their peak, but then you had Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, who were still good, but they were aging. But, like, you had Bird and Magic, who were the best players in the prior decade, the 80s. They were aging, but still very effective, which is very similar to LeBron, Curry, and KD, the three best players of the 2010s, now coming into the Olympics. Not exactly in their prime, but still very good. I would argue LeBron and KD have been the two best players on the team in these Olympics. And the U.S., they've had... Here's another stat that kind of showcases their depth. They've had four leading scorers and four different leading scorers in 4 games. That just shows they don't have to rely on one person or another. They can rely on Booker, Anthony Edwards. You know, they can play big. They got with Anthony Davis. You know, they have LeBron James, who might have the highest basketball IQ ever. They have Steph Curry, greatest shooter ever. Kevin Durant, one of the best scorers of this generation. And like I said, Steph, LeBron, KD, yeah, they're out of their prime, but no one was able... When they were in their prime, no one could touch them. So just because they're not necessarily at their best anymore doesn't mean they're not right up there with the Anthony Edwards of the world and the Anthony Davises of the world. Or Devin Booker, for that matter. You know, they got a lot of great scorers on this team. They got guys that can actually play defense. Just to add on to having three best players of the last decade. So the U.S., I think the only thing that can beat them at this point is themselves. All right, let's move on to football again. Nick Saban was on a podcast saying that the expectations are often the killer for rookie quarterbacks. And I thought this was interesting because it really is true. I mean, it's possible that the rookie quarterbacks that get drafted, you never know what they're going to be in the NFL. I mean, the way I see it, the better your situation is in college football, the less likely you are to succeed in the NFL. Because like I said about Mac Jones at Alabama, like, in Alabama, he had a fantasy land there. So my expectations were lower for him than they were for other quarterbacks in that draft. But in the last 15 years, there have been 46 first-round quarterbacks. And I went through all of them. All of them. Of the 46 quarterbacks drafted in the first round in the last 15 years, I was only able to count 8 that I think were like genuine hits. There's some that I'm kind of on the fence about, and some that were complete misses. But only 8 quarterbacks, I would say, were hits in the last 15 years. That's C.J. Stroud, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Andrew Luck, which you could argue, but I think in the years he played, he was excellent, and Matthew Stafford. He proved that. I mean, he had 8 seasons with the Lions where he threw for over 4,000 yards, and the second he left the Lions, he won a Super Bowl. So if that doesn't prove that he was a hit, I don't know what does. But yeah, of the 46 first-round quarterbacks in the last 15 years, 8 of those 46 are hits for me. That's 17% of the first-round quarterbacks. And, like, if I'm going through it, you know, like, there's Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson from last year, which we're not sure about yet. Then there's Kenny Pickett the year before. Then there's the 2021 guys, which I have no idea. I think Mac Jones is a miss. Fields, we don't really know yet. Trey Lance was a miss. Zach Wilson was a miss. Trevor Lawrence looks good, I guess. He's okay right now. But I can't say he's a hit. Then there's Tua, who I'm kind of on the fence about. Jordan Love as well. You know, Kyler Murray's pretty good. I think Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins were misses. Baker's okay. Sam Darnold was a miss. Josh Rosen was a miss. Trubisky. Yes, Deshaun Watson. The thing with Deshaun Watson is the fact that he got suspended and came back looking a little rusty. If he gets back to form, then I think he was a hit. But yeah, for a few years he was a top 5 quarterback. So if I guess you could convince me to put him in there, but even then, it's only 9 out of 46 first-round quarterbacks that were hits. Then there's Goff and Wentz, who are they're okay. Goff is pretty good. Paxton Lynch was a miss. Mariota and Winston. Bortles, Manziel, Bridgewater. EJ Manuel, RG3. Brandon Whedon. Tannehill was good in Tennessee for a bit, but ultimately disappointing for someone who was drafted 8th. Jake Locker, Blaine Gabbert, Christian Ponder. Cam Newton's another guy. I mean, he... I can't completely discredit Cam because he did win an MVP, but he was at his best, he was a mediocre passer. So, I'm looking for great quarterbacks, like big hits. Not guys that were okay. Sam Bradford, Tim Tebow in 2010, and then Mark Sanchez and Josh Friedman. Those were all the guys that I think were either okay or just complete misses. So, yeah. There's only 8 quarterbacks of the 46 that I would say were genuine hits. And that just shows how hard it is, how hard the transition from college to the NFL is. I don't think these guys aren't talented. I think Sam Bradford was talented. Bridgewater, even Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold are talented. It's just that transition in the NFL is a difficult one. So I think a lot of times people set unrealistic expectations for these college quarterbacks, and then they flop and they get crapped on for it. Especially with these quarterback comparisons, those are the biggest, I think, expectation killers. When Baker Mayfield was entering the draft, he was being compared to Drew Brees. When Tua was entering the draft, he was getting comparisons to Drew Brees. Now, I think Baker is turning his career around, which looks good. He's not Drew Brees, and neither is Tua. That was an unrealistic bar. Like, you're comparing them to one of the best quarterbacks to ever play in the NFL. It's not really fair for a bunch of college kids. Same thing with Joe Burrow. Like, comparing him to Joe Montana and Tom Brady just because he had a good year in college. I get that it was historic, but comparing him to Montana and Brady, he's a great quarterback, but that's unfair to do to a college kid. It puts an unrealistic amount of pressure and expectation on them. So with Caleb Williams, he's getting a similar treatment, and I think two things are going to happen to him. Because of his unusual talent, he's either going to wind up like Trevor Lawrence, prove that he's talented, but not really. Now it's not going to jump out in numbers. Or he's going to have a CJ Stroud year where he completely jumps onto the scene and brings the Bears to the playoffs unexpectedly. I don't see Caleb Williams busting, but I don't see him being like CJ Stroud. I think that's a unrealistic expectation being put on the guy. But yeah, I mean, expectations, it's on a bunch of 20-year-old kids is, I think Nick Saban's absolutely right in his assessment there. I think that is truly what kills a lot of these young quarterbacks. All right, sticking with the theme of quarterbacks, Mike Tomlin. So Russell Wilson was on the initial depth chart listed as the starter, but that's not official. None of that's finalized yet. And Mike Tomlin did address it, saying there is still very much a competition between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think there's benefits to both. I think Wilson is a better decision maker with the ball. I think he throws a better and more accurate ball. But then, there's also the injury risk. First of all, he's been the whole reason Fields even has a chance at the starting position is because Wilson is injured. And I don't think that's due to him being brittle. Wilson went his entire career avoiding injury. But he's older now, so that's going to be the appeal to Fields. Fields is injury-free right now. He's younger, more mobile, more athletic, so that's going to be the benefit to him, which I think will eventually outweigh the benefits to Wilson being the better thrower of the football and the more experienced one. So I think ultimately Fields will get the starting job, but I like listen, I mean, Mike Tomlin, I like him, but I think he's always been better at making decisions defensively than offensively. And that's why last year when Matt Canada was the OC, the Steelers were really struggling. But I think Mike Tomlin's an awesome coach, but he's never been great at picking quarterbacks since Big Ben has left. Big Ben was the last good quarterback for them. But, whatever he decides is going to have to work, because Mike Tomlin always seems to have a winning season in spite of the fact that I feel like the last 5 years, Steelers should not be getting winning seasons, but they are. And that's due to Tomlin's fantastic coaching. So, whatever he decides, I'm sure will work out for them. Alright, so Nick Bosa commented on the Niners trading Ayuk, saying it would be a huge move for the organization. And no, my opinion hasn't changed on this. I mean, he's a great player, very talented, but I don't think they need him for a Super Bowl. Like, I really don't think... Yeah, Brandon Ayuk... Remember, the Niners were blowing teams out last season with Brandon Ayuk. And as I said, I compared the rosters. Last year's roster that made the Super Bowl to the 2019 roster. Their roster... take Brandon Ayuk away from that roster last year. That's a much more loaded roster than they had in 2019. Right, so in 2019, I will say it again. In 2019, they did not have a CMC. I think they had an inferior quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is not as good as Brock Purdy. And yet they still had a similar defense. They still had Trent Williams, still had Kyle Shanahan. So basically, getting rid of Ayuk makes them the 2019 Niners, who made the Super Bowl and damn near won it. It makes them that team, just with a better quarterback and CMC, who was one of the best running backs of the decade. So, I mean, I don't see... And like I said yesterday, the Chiefs, they got rid of Tyreek Hill last year. Still made the Super Bowl. It didn't change how good the Chiefs are because they kept Mahomes and Andy Reid. So getting rid of Ayuk, I don't think is going to kill them too much. Alright, so Joel Embiid, also, I forgot to mention him, had a pretty solid performance against Brazil. 14 points and 7 boards. Listen, very talented player. His ultimate downfall in his career, and I believe he's going to be a Hall of Famer. His downfall is going to be similar to that of James Harden. And James Harden, don't forget, has had some of the most iconic, I don't know. He threatened Will Chamberlain's, I feel like he broke it. I'm trying to remember, but 2019, his 30-point per game streak was insane. And he didn't even win MVP that year. Giannis did. But James Harden is one of the best scorers of all time. He will be in the Hall of Fame, but he's also going to be remembered not only for his great scoring, but also not playing well in the playoffs. And that's the path I fear Embiid is headed on, where he is a great scorer. I think I feel like I'm remembering a stat that said he averaged a point per minute last year in the regular season, though. That's the big thing. He did that in the regular season, yes, but in the playoffs, he's not the same guy. So until he fixes that, yes, he'll still be a Hall of Famer, but it's it's going to be tough for Philly to wrap their arms around him. I think because Philly fans, they love him now, but they get impatient pretty quickly. So if Embiid continues this, I don't know if he's going to look like in Philly very much. Alright, so there was another report on Ayuk, and it said he has no interest. So yesterday, I talked about a report that the Patriots and Cleveland Browns were interested, but this report says that Brandon Ayuk has no interest in joining the Pats. And I think this is important because the Patriots have become the equivalent of the Bulls without Jordan. Ever since Jordan left, the Bulls are non-existent. In the last, how long? It's been 26 years since Jordan left the Bulls, and I cannot think of one thing they did. Not a conference championship run. I just said conference championship. That was stupid. Not an Eastern Conference run. And by the way, the Eastern Conference has historically been the weaker one. So it's just weird to think in a weaker in the easiest conference they can be in the NBA. The Bulls, they made the playoffs a few times, but they've never been past the second round. They have been non-existent ever since Jordan left. And the Patriots, let's face it, they were never great at drafting receivers or really any offensive position for that matter. They signed Randy Moss. They did, I will say to their credit, they did develop Edelman and Gronk, which is great, but their team was very much ran through Belichick, who is the greatest defensive coach to ever live. And so basically the defense with Belichick and the offense with Brady. But we saw, once that offense didn't have Brady, or rather replaced Brady with Mac Jones, it's not the same thing. So the Patriots, without Brady, they still have Belichick's great defensive mind, still have a solid defense, but their offense is lacking. And the defense can't play every moment of the game. So where does that leave them? It leaves them in the same place that the Bulls have been ever since Jordan left. And with Brady gone and now Belichick gone, same way. I should also be bringing up Phil Jackson because that Bulls team is not the same without Phil Jackson's incredible mind. So the same way Phil Jackson and Jordan left the Bulls, and they haven't been the same, Belichick and Brady, they're gone. And so are the days of the Patriots dominating this league. Alright, so yesterday, another highlight against Brazil. Kevin Durant became the U.S. all-time leading scorer in the Olympics. And listen, I do find it interesting that even though LeBron and KD are out of their prime, I think they've been the two most important players on this USA team. And that's not to discredit Anthony Edwards or Devin Booker or Anthony Davis, who was also spectacular. But LeBron and KD are showing it may have been a while since LeBron and KD have been in the finals. 5 years since KD and 6 years since LeBron. They're still very much at the top of the league, in spite of what you might want to think. A lot of people are trying to push them out of the top 10, but I think they're still very much up there with the SGH of the world, the Anthony Edwards of the world. You know, they're very much still up there in spite of what people want to think. And I compared them to Larry Bird and Magic, or rather I said they were in a similar situation to Magic and Bird. But we all know, at that point in Bird and Magic's career, they were pretty much checked out. They were giving the occasional solid performance, but they were checked out. Kevin Durant and LeBron, they're still in there. They're still averaging 25 to 30 points a game. LeBron's still posting triple-doubles. They are still among the best in the league, whether you like it or not. Let's shift to football. Dak Prescott said CeeDee Lamb is ready to get back with the Cowboys, and I know at this point Cowboys fans hate me, but I don't really care. Listen, I have said they are fantastic in the regular season, but you can't deny their lack of success in the playoffs the last few years. And this off-season drama is not making me any higher on them. You know, I've already cited what makes me believe that off-season drama contributes to a team's performance. Because Aaron Rodgers, even in his worst year, 2023, I'm pretty sure his stats were better or on par with Jordan Love's this year. And they had a similar roster, same coach. With Aaron Rodgers, they didn't make the playoffs. Last year with Jordan Love, they not only made the playoffs, they won a playoff game and then went toe-to-toe with the Super Bowl appearing Niners. So why was last year so much more successful than the year before in spite of the similar roster and similar quarterback play? Less noise in the offseason without Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'm not saying I'm glad Rodgers left. I'm not one of those lying Packers fans that likes to pretend I'm happy we lost one of the best quarterbacks ever. I'm not. But I do think it served as a benefit last year that we didn't have. Because, listen, if we kept Rodgers, it would be the same story as the last two off seasons before that, where Rodgers is going to be unhappy there, and it's going to be more noise, leads to a worse season. So with CeeDee Lamb and Dak having contract problems, I don't know how much I like Dallas this year. I think they'll be competing with the Eagles the same way they did last year for best in the division. Maybe a 10-win team. They're going to be solid. They got a lot of talent. But I am foreseeing another first-round exit for them. So, with that, let's move on to another player that's holding out. Hassan Reddick has now totaled $1 million in fines as his holdout continues. And listen, I've told you my opinion on the Jets. I think if everyone stays healthy, they really are probably a 10-11 win team. And they probably make the playoffs. Like I said, it's hard for for me to wrap my arms around the fact that this team is relying on a 40-year-old who just tore his Achilles. If he stays healthy, they're going to be great. If not, if he tweaks that Achilles, I don't know. But, like, you know, I don't know. With Hassan Reddick holding out, they better hope he shows up for the season because he's going to be a major part in that front seven. The Jets have, for the last 5 years, had a very good defense go to waste, which you hate to see. And they've really had great talent go to waste in Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. And it's really all because of that O-line and quarterback play. You know, I am by no means a fan of Mark Sanchez. I think he was absolutely awful. But he was at least average in those 2 championship runs. If you look at his playoff stats, he was about average, which was good enough for a team that had a spectacular defense and a good run game. Right now, the Jets have a similar situation. Breece Hall's a great running back. They have a great defense, but O-line is lacking still. They did get better, but O-line's still lacking. However, they make up with that with adding Garrett Wilson. They didn't really have a Garrett Wilson when they made the AFC Championship last time. And the problem is, as bad as Mark Sanchez was, he was not as bad as Sam Darnold or Zach Wilson. So I think if Hassan Reddick stops holding out, this Jets team is without a doubt formidable and capable of winning the division. But there's a lot of what-ifs surrounding the team. It's hard for me to make a prediction for them. All right, shifting back to the NBA side of things, Lauri Markkanen signed a 5-year, $238 million contract with the Utah Jazz. Why they're paying him this much, I don't know. He's by no means a star player in the league. He's a good player. You know, he's nice to have. He's probably a good number 3 option on a championship team. But that's not what the Jazz are. The Jazz are a below-average team, especially in a stacked Western Conference. So, I mean, you're talking about a team that finished 12th in the Western Conference last year. How many games? They lost, I want to say they lost 55 games last year. I'm checking my facts right now. But, so 31-51 last year. They were 10 games behind the 11th seed, the Rockets, and 15 games behind even getting into a play-in. They were 15 games off of being in a play-in, which I still think is a very stupid idea. A 10 seed should not have a chance, but I'm not going to get into that right now. So, I mean, signing Lauri Markkanen, it'll make them slightly better. They're maybe going to get the 10 spot. But paying him that much just seems irrational to me. I mean, who they got Colin Sexton, John Collins, Lauri Markkanen. It's like, it's a 10 seed or an 11 seed. And now you just poured in a bunch of money on a guy who doesn't deserve that much. So, Utah Jazz, I mean, go for it, I guess, but I'm not very high on that team right now. All right, so I got 2 more topics left. The Cardinals, not really sure why this made the news, but they like where Kyler Murray is at and won't play him in the preseason. Now, with the Cardinals, the reason I put the story in the show today. It's not because it really matters, but I do think a lot of... I did say yesterday, I think what the coach believes of the quarterback is very important. So if they're telling you Kyler Murray doesn't have to play in the preseason, it tells you that in spite of how last year went, they are still high on Kyler Murray. And only time's going to tell if he performs well. But, I think it does speak volumes that they still have confidence in him after playing 8 games last year. And to be fair, he wasn't awful in those 8 games. Wasn't exactly great, 89 quarterback rating, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks, 66% completion percentage, 3-5 record. So he had above average stats, but the problem the Cardinals will always run into for the next 5-7 years is that they are in the division with the Niners, and also for a little bit more the Rams. I do think the Rams are better than people think. I think the Cardinals, let's face it, they're going to get swept by the Niners, barring any injuries, which I'll get to in a second, but yeah, that's going to be their main problem. I think they have talent on their team. Marvin Harrison is a very interesting draft pick for them. I think he's going to be spectacular, but not enough to get over the hump of the Niners. I think at this point they're playing for third right now, them and the Eagles. I do think they're better on paper than the Eagles, but we'll see how it all works out. But yeah, and it's good to know the Cardinals trust in Kyler Murray. I would consider it news if he was playing in the preseason, because that would tell me they don't trust him. So yeah, Cardinals, they're looking at third place, unfortunately. In spite of the exciting ad of Marvin Harrison Jr. All right, last topic of the day. CMC is likely to miss a few weeks with an ankle injury. Now, should that matter? Probably not. But, he should be healthy by the time the season starts. But if he's not, then my whole point about Brandon Ayuk doesn't really matter now, does it? You know what I'm saying? Because if CMC's not there, I don't know who their backup is. But if their backup's good enough, they might just be the 2019 Niners. But yeah, CMC, that would be a massive loss. If it were up to me, he would have been the MVP last year. He's a very valuable player, especially the Niners. All right, Elijah Mitchell, yeah. So pretty much if CMC got hurt, they would be the 2019 Niners. Not the worst thing, but CMC I think has become a very big part of that offense and that system. So his loss would be it would affect the entire Niners team. It would still be pretty good, but yeah, that would have a massive impact. So, good stuff today. I will not be able to do a podcast tomorrow, but I will be able to do one on Friday, and I should be good the week after that. So, yeah. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose Dylan. Have a good day. See you Friday.